What if everything you've been told about Jesus, his miracles, compassion, divine mission, was just the visible edge of something much more immense, more ancient, and more radical than anyone dares to speak aloud? Imagine the figure revered in churches, painted in stained glass, and preached from pulpits, was not merely a healer or teacher, but a bearer of esoteric truths so profound that history had to erase them just to keep the world from changing too fast. What if the greatest story ever told is, in fact, the greatest story never fully revealed? This isn't about challenging faith. It's about igniting it. Not with passive belief, but with daring curiosity and personal awakening. Beneath the stories of Jesus lies a silence, a gap, so vast that it shakes the foundation of what we think we know. That silence spans 18 years. From the age of 12, where the Gospels briefly mention him discussing theology in the temple, to 30, where he emerges baptized and begins his ministry, there is nothing. No documented travels. No parables. No miracles. No trace. It's not just a gap, it's an intentional void. It whispers of knowledge hidden in journeys untold. This omission speaks louder than Scripture. It begs us to ask, where was he? What was he doing? What was he learning, and why have we been denied that knowledge? Theologians cautiously avoid this black hole, and institutions often label inquiries into it as heretical. But mystics, seekers, and independent scholars are drawn to it like moths to flame. And what they've found isn't just plausible, it's breathtaking. They speak of Jesus not in isolation, but as a student of the ancient world's deepest mysteries. From the initiatory rites of Egypt to the metaphysical philosophies of India, from Vedic hymns to Chaldean stargazing, a path begins to form, a path of preparation, transformation, and awakening. These ancient traditions did not merely teach theology. They taught consciousness. They spoke in the language of symbols, of ritual, of internal transmutation. In these traditions, Jesus may not have been the exception, but the fulfillment. Not an isolated figure, but a culmination of thousands of years of hidden science. Within these systems, the idea of doors is a recurring motif. Not doors of wood or stone, but doors of perception, consciousness, and soul state. The Egyptians mapped the 12 gates of the Duat, thresholds the soul passes in its journey beyond death. The Essenes, known for their mystic discipline and whom Jesus may have encountered, practiced rituals aligned with cosmic rhythms, rituals of purification not just of body, but of vibration. Hinduism, too, speaks of chakras, wheels of life force energy along the spine, gates between our physical form and subtler planes of reality. So why does the number 13 haunt these traditions? Why the extra gate? 12 represents the known, 12 disciples, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 zodiac signs, a structure of spiritual governance. But 13? 13 is the rupture. The unknown. The 13th door is not just an addition, it's a rebellion. It's the symbol of transformation that breaks the mold, the pattern breaker that collapses certainty and births new consciousness. Ancient numerology saw 13 not as unlucky, but as uncontainable. It is the serpent shedding its skin, the phoenix emerging from flame. Jesus, in this sense, may be the embodiment of that 13th frequency. He didn't just work miracles, he disrupted the system. He shattered norms, traditions, and hierarchies. His very existence is threaded with numerological and astrological codes that transcend doctrine and tap into a more cosmic awareness. Consider this: his birth occurred under rare celestial alignments, his teachings unfold in the geometry of sacred space, and at the Last Supper, there are 13 present. 13. A cosmic cipher wrapped in the guise of a meal. The official Gospels, carefully compiled and redacted for political stability and theological conformity, omit not only years but whole texts, dozens of them. Among the apocryphal treasures sits the Gospel of Thomas. It contains no narrative, No miracles, just sayings. 114 of them. And within them, the suggestion that Jesus was never trying to save you, he was trying to wake you up. The kingdom is within you and also outside of you. When you know yourselves, then you will be known. These words are not moral instructions. They are multidimensional maps. They hint at a Jesus who was less a founder of religion and more a teacher of consciousness. His parables were not just clever metaphors, they were vibrational codes meant to bypass logic and strike the inner chords of the soul. This is the threshold of the first door. A shift from passive acceptance to active inner work. The Gospels themselves tell us Jesus often withdrew from the crowd. His greatest moments of insight, healing, and transformation happened not in grand cathedrals, but in stillness. In deserts. On mountaintops. In the pauses between the words. Silence, for Jesus, wasn't absence, it was the medium of transmission. So what if his silence about those lost years was not a void, but an invitation? What if the real mystery wasn't in what Jesus said, but in what he knew and didn't say? Crossing the first door means no longer viewing Jesus as a distant deity to be worshipped, but as a model to be understood. Faith, then, becomes not blind trust, but courageous search. We shift from belief to experience. From memorizing prayers to opening inner gateways. The moment you accept that the missing years may hide a spiritual initiation, a deeper layer of the story unfolds. We begin to see Jesus not only as a redeemer but as a metaphysical pioneer, someone who knew how to traverse states of consciousness, navigate vibrational thresholds, and embody the divine in human form. And then comes the second door. If Jesus wasn't only a man, or only a God, but a living bridge between worlds, then we must rethink not just our theology, but our entire model of reality. When he said, "Before Abraham was, I am," he wasn't flexing divine ancestry. He was speaking in quantum terms. I am isn't a timeline, it's a state. A vibrational field. A recognition of timeless awareness that exists beyond birth and death. In uttering that phrase, Jesus didn't just quote the sacred name of God, he embodied it. Scholars who operate outside traditional frameworks suggest Jesus may have been initiated in multiple wisdom schools. The Essenes taught the coming of a light-bearer and used rituals to shift consciousness. In India, he could have studied breath, energy, and karma with masters of prana and dharma. In Tibet, he may have meditated in caves with the lamas, learning to move awareness beyond the body. In Egypt, he might have undergone death and resurrection rites in the temples of Isis and Thoth, learning the soul's architecture. None of this contradicts the Gospels, it illuminates them. Because suddenly, the miracles make more sense. Walking on water isn't just a show of divine muscle, it's mastery over emotional chaos. Multiplying loaves? Abundance is a state of frequency, not scarcity. Healing the blind? Reactivating the inner sight, not just physical vision. Each miracle, then, becomes a parable in action, an encoded lesson in the mastery of different planes of being. And in all of this, one phrase rings like a bell through the centuries: the kingdom of heaven is within you. Not above. Not after death. But within. This is not religious poetry, it is a radical metaphysical proposition. Heaven is not a destination but a frequency. A state of coherence where duality collapses. When Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world," he wasn't referring to an external place but to a parallel dimension of consciousness. This explains why so often he spoke in riddles, in parables, and, importantly, in silences. Because some truths are not meant to be heard. They are meant to be felt. They are not informational. They are transformational. He did not perform miracles to dazzle. He acted as a mirror, a reminder, a channel for those ready to awaken their own dormant divine capacities. That's why he always asked, "Do you believe?" not as a prerequisite to healing, but as an activation key. Because belief, true, embodied, resonant belief, alters your frequency. And that frequency is the gateway to transformation. So as we step fully into this renewed understanding, the figure of Jesus expands before us, not smaller, not merely human, but far greater than the icon we've inherited. A consciousness so vast that institutions had to shrink it just to contain it. But no more. The time for passive reverence is over. The time for direct remembrance has begun. What if the real power of Jesus was never in the miracles we celebrate, nor the sermons we quote, but in a deeper, more revolutionary truth that organized religion has tried to bury for centuries? What if the most dangerous thing he taught was not how to worship, but how to awaken? The Gnostic texts, those ancient scrolls and scriptures the church declared too radical, too dangerous, paint a picture of Christ that challenges everything we've been told. The Gospel of Philip, for instance, doesn't speak of Christ as merely a title for one man, but as a living frequency. A state of being. A vibration that anyone, yes, anyone, can tune into. In this view, Christ is not Jesus' last name, it's a description of his state of consciousness. To be Christ is to be aligned with the divine frequency of truth, clarity, and light. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene goes even further. It offers us something rare in religious history, an intimate, spiritual dialogue between Jesus and a woman he clearly held in high esteem. Their discussions, far from theological debates, revolve around the soul, the nature of inner light, and the invisible barriers between spirit and material existence. It's here, in this forbidden gospel, that we see Jesus not just as a teacher, but as a guide through the unseen layers of the self. So why were these texts hidden? Because they are subversive in the most empowering way possible. They shift the center of spiritual power away from temples, institutions, and hierarchies, and return it to you. They tell you the sacred is not something you must reach for through intermediaries, but something you already carry within your own being. These writings threaten not just theological order, but the very foundation of power. If everyone can become Christ, who needs a church to tell them how? Some of these texts even hint that the word Christ was once understood as a harmonic resonance, a particular frequency of consciousness. It existed beyond language, beyond dogma, beyond identity. It was a living vibration. To become Christ was not metaphorical, it was energetic. It was about embodying a consciousness so pure, so aligned, that ego, time, and physical limitations fall away. Think of it this way, just as Buddha represents the awakened, Christ represents the anointed, the one illuminated by the pure essence of divine light. And just as Buddha wasn't the only one capable of awakening, Jesus wasn't the exclusive carrier of the Christ light. He was the first of many. A prototype. A luminous pathfinder showing us not how to adore him, but how to become like him. This path is not linear. It's not a straight line from ignorance to enlightenment. It is a spiral, a descent into the self, a dance with the unknown. It demands a kind of faith that is not about memorizing verses but about diving into the depths of your own soul. It asks you to strip away the layers of conditioning, to peel back the veils of illusion, and to discover that the light you were told to worship is the same light pulsing in your chest. When Jesus spoke of being born again, he wasn't talking about religious conversion. He wasn't asking people to adopt a new set of beliefs. He was talking about something far more radical, a rupture in perception. A complete rewiring of how we see reality. A moment where the ego surrenders and consciousness blooms into something timeless, limitless, and whole. And here's where things get even more mystical. According to the canonical Gospels themselves, after his resurrection, Jesus doesn't just appear, he shifts. He changes form. He enters through locked doors. He vanishes at will. These are not ghost stories. These are clues. They tell us that Jesus had moved beyond the constraints of three-dimensional space. He had crossed veils most of us don't even know exist. He moved between realities. He had become a being of light. This is not mythology. It's mysticism, practical and profound. It suggests that Jesus didn't just know about higher dimensions, he lived in them. He moved through them as easily as we walk through rooms. And that brings us to the real question, the terrifyingly beautiful question. If he could do it, why can't we? He said it himself, "You will do greater works than these." Not as a metaphor, but as a transmission. A prophecy. An invitation to remember what we are truly made of. His greatest act of defiance wasn't against the empire, it was against limitation itself. He dared to declare that the divine is not some far-off entity, but something alive and breathing within every human heart. And this is the key to the second veil. Jesus was not a magician. He was a master of reality. He was not performing miracles to impress, but demonstrating truths so ancient and powerful that entire systems of control were built just to keep them hidden. He didn't just leave us teachings, he left us keys. Keys encoded in his actions, his silences, his cryptic phrases. And now we arrive at the threshold of another door. Picture the Temple of Solomon. Not as a building, but as a sacred blueprint, a map of the cosmos and the human being intertwined. The outer court represents the body, the holy place, the mind. And the Holy of Holies, the deepest chamber, is the soul. This innermost space was hidden behind a thick veil. Only the high priest, once a year, could enter it. The veil wasn't just cloth. It was consciousness. It was the psychic barrier between humanity and the divine presence. And then, at the exact moment Jesus dies, that veil is torn from top to bottom. Not by human hands. Not by coincidence. By a spiritual event of seismic magnitude. This isn't just a dramatic scene, it's a metaphysical revolution. The divine is no longer locked away. The separation between man and source is over. Jesus didn't just die, he detonated the lie of distance. His death was not an ending, it was the ignition of access. The sacred is no longer hidden in temples. It's in your breath, your body, your consciousness. Jewish mysticism, especially Kabbalah, teaches that there are multiple worlds. 4, to be exact. The world of action, the world of formation, the world of creation, and the world of divine emanation. These realms aren't places, they're frequencies. Dimensions layered like translucent veils. And each one is harder to perceive because it requires a subtler awareness. The temple, in this view, was a map. A living model of these worlds. The veil Jesus tore was the boundary between form and formlessness. Between human limitation and divine essence. And here's the beautiful, terrifying truth, those veils are still in place. Not around a building, but inside us. They are the walls of fear, doubt, shame, and trauma. They are the filters that distort our vision, make us believe we are separate, unworthy, small. Jesus not only knew these veils, he lived beyond them. He passed through them daily. Every gesture, every parable, every healing was a map, an instruction encoded in simplicity. When he spoke, he wasn't teaching concepts. He was reprogramming consciousness. When we understand this, we see that the tearing of the veil wasn't just an external sign. It was an internal possibility. A rupture in the illusion that you are anything less than divine. He never once said, "Worship me." He said, "Be perfect as your Father is perfect." In other words, become what I am. Access what I accessed. Step into the Holy of Holies inside your own being. That's not blasphemy. That's your birthright. Mystical traditions across the globe echo this. The Egyptian goddess Isis, bearer of divine wisdom, was always shown with a veil. Only the initiate, only the one who had transcended illusion, could lift it. Plato's cave? A metaphor for awakening. For tearing the veil and seeing what lies beyond shadow. And who created the veil in the first place? We did. We chose, long ago, to forget. To descend into density. To experience form, limitation, duality. Not as punishment, but as part of the grand experiment of consciousness. But now the invitation has returned. We are being called to remember. To rejoin. To reawaken. Jesus didn't come to start a new religion. He came to shatter the ones that imprison. To show us how to walk through the veils we ourselves created. He broke the rules. He touched the untouchable. He spoke with women and outcasts. He healed on the Sabbath. Every act was a sacred rebellion. Every gesture, a blueprint of liberation. And most radically of all, he taught that the real temple is within. Enter your room, close the door, and pray in secret, he said. He wasn't talking about a literal room. He meant the inner chamber of your being. The soul sanctuary where ego dissolves and the eternal voice speaks. This kind of spirituality threatens power structures. It empowers the individual. That's why so many sacred texts were buried, burned, or labeled heretical. Because they didn't just tell stories. They contained maps, codes, instructions for transcending the illusion of separation. The Book of Enoch, for example, describes celestial journeys, angelic realms, and hidden dimensions. Apocryphal writings speak of light bodies, soul travels, and divine encounters beyond the veil of the known. These were not fantasies. They were testimonies. And they remind us, what we've been taught is only a sliver of the truth. The real story, the deeper story, is still unfolding inside you. What if the silence you avoid is actually the threshold to your awakening? What if stillness, terrifying in its emptiness, was never a void, but the birthplace of power? In a world that screams for attention, where identity is built on noise, distraction, and external validation, what if the truest self can only be found in the desert of unknowing? There comes a moment in every seeker's life when beliefs are no longer enough. When scriptures can no longer substitute for direct experience. When rituals feel hollow and answers stale. That moment is the door. Not a door you walk through, but one that opens only when everything else falls away. That door is silence. That door is the desert. But this desert is not made of sand. It is made of absence. Of solitude. Of the stripping away of all that is not essential. Jesus didn't enter the wilderness to escape. He entered to remember. 40 days and 40 nights. Not an arbitrary time. Not a mythic flourish. This is a sacred cycle encoded across traditions. The 40 days of the flood, the 40 years in the wilderness, the 40 weeks of gestation. 40 marks the arc of transformation, the full curve of death and rebirth. And in that arc, the soul is pressed, broken open, until what is false is burned away. What did Jesus face there? Tradition speaks of temptations. But let's look deeper. These weren't tests from a devil with horns. These were encounters with internal archetypes, powerful, condensed thought forms that crystallize human fear, longing, and illusion. The need for control. The hunger for recognition. The craving for security. These are the ancient snares of the soul. They whisper not from outside, but from the shadow within. In modern terms, these are the frequencies of distortion. And Jesus, by refusing them, wasn't just being morally upright. He was vibrationally discerning. He knew that aligning with those energies would pull him out of coherence with his divine source. And so he said no, not just with words, but with frequency. His refusal wasn't reaction. It was resonance. He didn't push away temptation. He stood in his own alignment so deeply that illusion couldn't enter his field. This is the real meaning of passing through the veil. The veil is not just a metaphor. It is a layer of perception, a vibrational membrane that filters what we can access. And silence, true, deep silence, is the solvent that dissolves that veil. Silence in this sense isn't just the absence of noise. It is the presence of presence. It is a dimension of consciousness where thought ceases to lead, and awareness takes the throne. In that silence, something extraordinary happens. Logos emerges, not as speech, but as living vibration. The Word, as the Gospel of John tells us, was with God, and was God. That word is not sound. It is the foundational tone, the primal pulse, the organizing frequency of creation. And Jesus, in the desert, tunes into it, not by thinking, but by being. His prayers become breath. His longing becomes listening. Time stretches. The ordinary dissolves. And in that space, he doesn't find God as an object. He remembers God as his essence. This is not metaphor. This is mystic science. When he returns from the desert, he is transformed. Not with new teachings, but with new presence. He doesn't teach as someone who studied. He speaks as someone who knows. Because in that empty, desolate, wind-blown space, he remembered. He remembered the truth that no synagogue, no scroll, no high priest could teach. He remembered who he was. And who we are. That is why the desert matters. The desert exists in many forms. It can be a heartbreak, a death, a diagnosis, a breakdown that strips you of everything you thought you were. But it can also be a conscious choice, a retreat, a silence, a pause where you willingly step out of the noise to meet what is real. Fasting isn't just about food. It's about pulling your attention away from every external stimulus, social media, constant goals, endless comparison, and letting your nervous system remember what it feels like to be without artificial input. It is a detox of the soul, a clearing of the psychic field. Each moment in silence is a tear in the veil. Each day in stillness is a thread of illusion unraveling. And when the veil falls, what do we find? Not absence, but light. Not emptiness, but essence. That is why the prophets always heard in the desert. That is why revelation always comes after isolation. Because the divine does not shout. It whispers. And if you cannot hear it, perhaps it's because your soul is too crowded. The desert gives the soul space to speak. And so Jesus walked through it. Not once, but again and again in his life. Because silence wasn't a side ritual, it was his foundation. The desert was his sacred classroom. The cave where his humanity remembered its divinity. The place where words died, and knowing bloomed. And that is why, after the desert, his miracles didn't come from effort. They came from coherence. His words didn't need to be explained. They vibrated. They reorganized energy. They created fields of resonance. When he said, "Rise and walk," he wasn't giving an instruction. He was emitting a frequency. A wave of belief so pure it collapsed the illness in its path. Not because he forced it, but because he aligned so fully with the divine logos that reality had no choice but to reconfigure. This is the science of light. Not just light as illumination, but light as structure. Light as intelligence. In mystic traditions, from Egypt to Tibet, from Kabbalah to quantum physics, light is not just metaphor, it is matter, frequency, information. Everything vibrates. Everything emits. And when vibration aligns with divine coherence, the impossible becomes obvious. Jesus knew this. That's why he didn't just heal. He transfigured. He didn't just teach. He encoded. His words were not data. They were activation. That's why he could say, "You are the light of the world," and mean it literally. Not "you carry the light," not "you seek the light," but that "you are the light." It's the most radical statement in spiritual history. It flips the entire model of worship. It removes the distance between God and man, sacred and mundane, teacher and student. It tells us that awakening is not a path towards something else, it's the unveiling of what has always been. This is why the Gnostic texts matter. They contain the missing notes of the original chord. They reveal Jesus not as a solitary savior, but as a frequency holder, a mirror. They show us that the Christ was never meant to be a statue on a pedestal, but a vibration within the temple of the human form. If your eyes are pure, your whole body will be filled with light. Not poetic fluff. That is metaphysical instruction. It tells us that our vision, our perception, literally shapes our energetic state. That clarity within translates to luminosity without. That healing doesn't begin in action, but in alignment. Jesus didn't just say this. He embodied it. He became light. And in doing so, he showed us how to do the same. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in front of a door. A door made of silence, of surrender, of courage to stop pretending. A door that asks not what you believe, but what you are willing to become. Will you step into the desert? Will you let go of the noise? Will you listen, not to the world, but to the breath of your own soul? Because on the other side of that veil, there is no religion. There is only presence. There is only light. What if the light we see isn't just around us, but within us, waiting to be awakened? What if Jesus didn't come to show us what we could admire, but what we could become? In teachings lost to time and scriptures hidden from doctrine, a vision of Jesus emerges not only as a bringer of light, but as one who became light, visibly, tangibly, vibrationally. The concept of the body of light isn't poetic. It is ancient spiritual science, mirrored in traditions across the globe. It describes the energetic field that surrounds, permeates, and ultimately transcends the physical form, a field capable of being activated, expanded, and illumined. This isn't abstract mysticism. The pineal gland, often called the third eye or the seat of the soul, lies at the center of this transformation. Revered across cultures, from the Eye of Horus in ancient Egypt to sacred geometry embedded in Catholic iconography, the pineal gland is not only a biological structure but a spiritual antenna. A portal. A lens through which higher realities are perceived, not merely imagined. The Gospels recount the moment on Mount Tabor, what we now call the Transfiguration. Jesus' face shining like the sun. His garments becoming radiant. This was not metaphor. It was manifestation. A state of perfect coherence where his inner divine frequency overtook the density of matter and shone visibly through every cell. Light not as reflection, but as emission. He wasn't alone. Two others appeared, Moses and Elijah. Masters of light in their own right. But this meeting didn't happen in ordinary space. It occurred where veils lift and realities overlap, an interdimensional zone. A holy nexus. What mystics call the thin place, where time folds and the eternal bleeds through. This phenomenon, light transfiguring matter, is not limited to the past. It echoes into quantum science today. DNA emits light, literally. This is called biophoton emission. Our cells glow, and that glow increases with health, coherence, and consciousness. Our hearts radiate electromagnetic fields measurable several feet beyond the body. Our thoughts generate frequencies. We are, quite literally, radiant beings. And Jesus showed us what it looks like to consciously embody that truth. Take the healing of the man born blind. It seems simple, even odd. Jesus spits on the ground, mixes mud, and applies it to the man's eyes. But this isn't a folk remedy. It is ritual, rooted in symbolic power. Mud is the earth, raw, unformed matter. In Genesis, humanity is sculpted from clay. In this moment, Jesus isn't just healing sight. He's recreating vision. He's performing a second Genesis. The man doesn't just see again, he's reborn. To understand this, we must step into Jesus' language, the language of light. His parables weren't quaint morality tales. They were fractals, multidimensional constructs of meaning. They operated like prisms, simple on the surface, but capable of splitting divine insight into infinite reflections, depending on the angle of the soul. This is why spiritual truth can't be taught linearly. It unfolds in spirals, like DNA. Like galaxies. Like evolution itself. And this is why Jesus often asked, "Do you believe?" Not as a test of loyalty, but as a mechanism of activation. Belief is not intellectual agreement. It is alignment. It is the vibration of trust so complete that it opens the inner eyes and dissolves the veil. Those who believe don't just see, they become able to make manifest what they see. Light is not something to be received. It is something to be remembered. And that's why Jesus said, "If your eye is pure, your whole body will be full of light." Your vision, your way of seeing, literally governs your energetic state. Purity of perception aligns your cells, tunes your field, and switches on dormant capacities. This is the awakening of the body of light, called Sahu in Egypt, Sarira in India, and glorified body in mystical Christianity. This wasn't reserved for saints. Jesus taught the mechanics of it. Breathing, visualization, inner stillness, energetic coherence. Practices shared across Eastern and esoteric traditions, lost in the rush of dogma and ritual but preserved in quiet circles of mystics. Today, science begins to confirm this. Studies show the heart's electromagnetic field influences the brain more than vice versa. Meditation alters gene expression. Deep states of presence expand consciousness. Our bodies are not fixed, they are responsive. Our field is fluid. Jesus knew this. He operated not by teaching doctrine but by broadcasting frequency. And frequency is transmissible. When he said, "Go and make disciples," he wasn't issuing a command to convert. He was inviting others to ignite. To become torches of the same flame. It was never about belief. It was about resonance. The disciples didn't perform miracles after Jesus' resurrection because they had new knowledge. They did it because they had received an imprint. His frequency had awakened something dormant in them. This is the secret of spiritual transmission. You don't teach it, you radiate it. And that light, transferred through gaze, touch, presence, has the power to reorganize matter. To reprogram cells. To open hearts. To awaken gifts. But to awaken that light in ourselves, we must turn inward. Not to our physical eyes, but to the eye of the heart. The third eye. The pineal center. The subtle gaze that perceives not with logic but with love. This is what it means to see with truth. To look beyond form. To recognize essence. To stop reacting to shadows and start radiating from the source. And when we do, the veils fall. The layers of fear, shame, programming, and separation dissolve. We stop trying to be saved. And we begin to remember, we are light. Not metaphorically. Not spiritually. Literally. This is the revelation of the fifth door. And it leads us to a table. A simple table. Bread. Wine. 13 people. The Last Supper. But what if it wasn't a goodbye? What if it was a ritual? Most see it as farewell, or as the institution of a sacrament. But for those with awakened eyes, it is something else entirely, a multidimensional encoding of divine frequency into form. Every element, the bread, the wine, the gestures, the words, was vibrationally choreographed. Not to represent, but to activate. This is my body. This is my blood. Not a symbol of death, but of transmutation. Matter becoming light. Flesh becoming vibration. Jesus wasn't asking his followers to idolize his body. He was showing them that the body itself is the temple, the bridge, the portal. When he broke the bread, he broke the illusion. When he blessed it, he charged it. When they ate it, they were not consuming, they were receiving frequency. It was DNA activation through substance. The wine was not blood, it was current. Vital life essence. Sacred liquid light. And look at the number. 13. Again. 12 plus the Christ. The cycle of completion with the seed of transformation. The 13th energy is always the portal, beyond form, beyond law, beyond system. Judas, the betrayer, becomes paradoxically the initiator. His action triggers the crucifixion. The crucifixion triggers the resurrection. The resurrection shatters the veil of death. Nothing was accidental. Everything was frequency. Even the verbs matter. He thinks. He breaks. He shares. He gives. Gratitude opens the heart field. Breaking releases hidden codes. Sharing creates energetic networks. Giving seals the transmission. Each act is a function. A spiritual technology. The supper wasn't a dinner, it was a quantum ritual. And then there are the gestures. Jesus lifts his eyes. Places his hands. Touches gently. These were not spontaneous. They were precise. They mirrored ancestral knowledge across the earth. The laying on of hands exists in every indigenous tradition, from African healing circles to Taoist energy work to Jewish Kabbalistic rites. The hands transmit. The palms pulse. They open channels and move light. When Jesus touched someone, he didn't just heal, they recalibrated. His field overrode the distortions in theirs. His coherence brought theirs into harmony. Not by force, but by resonance. He didn't just do miracles. He became one. And in doing so, he invited us to remember, we are capable of the same. Not someday. Not after death. But now. The bread is still on the table. The light is still within. And the invitation remains open. What if a single gesture could ripple through the soul like a bell through silence? What if the language of spirit was not spoken in words at all, but in touch, in presence, in vibration? In the ancient world, before neurology, before psychology, before even philosophy as we know it, there was already an intuitive knowing among the sages that the body is not just a vessel but a library. That every sinew, muscle, and joint remembers. The skin does not just feel, it stores. The bones do not just support, they witness. Within the flesh, layers of joy and sorrow, trauma and triumph, memory and myth are folded together like hidden scrolls waiting to be read. Jesus understood this deeply. His was not the body of mere flesh and blood, but a living transmission device. A coherent antenna pulsing with divine frequency. In his presence, things shifted, without explanation, without effort. His body didn't just walk through the world, it rewrote the energy of the world around it. Like an invisible sun, his field radiated in waves, dissolving darkness not with force, but with sheer resonance. People didn't simply feel better around him, they began to remember who they were. But in the centuries that followed, that original radiance was slowly covered over. Institutionalized. Flattened. Ritualized. The vibrant energy of presence became replaced with rigid doctrine. The sacred became formula. The Eucharist, a living moment of multidimensional transmission, was frozen into dogma. But its origin was never meant to be a ceremony repeated. It was meant to be an activation experienced. The bread was not merely bread. It was transformed matter, the mundane reborn as luminous substance. The wine wasn't just wine. It was a symbol of living flow, blood not as fluid but as essence, a vibratory stream connecting the divine to the incarnate. And the table, it was not a place of dining, but of convergence. A sacred circle where 12 human fields met the 13th, the Christ field. A frequency so high it turned the meal into a portal between worlds. And before this ritual began, Jesus knelt. He washed their feet, not to show humility alone, but to clear the circuitry. The feet, ancient medicine tells us, are maps of the entire body. Each point, each arch, each toe a mirror of organs, emotions, energy channels. Washing them was not hygiene, it was initiation. It was unlocking. It was saying, let the pathways be cleansed so the light may enter freely. This wasn't symbolism. It was technology. Everything he did carried coded meaning, but not the kind that can be analyzed and cataloged. These codes were vibrational, non-verbal. Each motion, a frequency. Each glance, a transmission. Each silence, a revelation. He didn't explain his teachings because explanations are for the mind, and the Christ operates beyond the mind. His communication was felt with the soul. It spoke to the spiritual DNA directly. It bypassed the intellect entirely. That's why, after the meal, when Jesus stood and walked toward crucifixion, the disciples still did not fully grasp what had happened, but something within them had been changed. Not intellectually, energetically. A seed was planted in each of them. A key was embedded. A light was left humming within their fields, waiting to awaken when the time was right. This is the true transmission. The kind that doesn't convince, doesn't argue, doesn't explain. It simply exists. And in its existence, it transforms. The bread became light. The body became temple. The supper became crossing. Thus ended the sixth door, and with it, the passage from teaching to transmutation. But what lay ahead was not peace. It was the abyss. The next threshold would not lead upward, but downward. Into shadow. Into the forgotten realms. Into the underworld. He descended into the realm of the dead. A phrase recited thoughtlessly by millions for centuries, embedded in the Apostles' Creed like a mystery hiding in plain sight. But what does it mean? What really happened between the crucifixion and the resurrection? In that gap of time, those 3 silent days, Jesus did not sleep. He descended. Not as a victim of death. Not as a lost soul. But as awakened consciousness, fully luminous, penetrating into the deepest layers of forgotten existence. This wasn't punishment. It was purpose. It wasn't surrender. It was retrieval. In ancient understandings, what we call hell was never eternal fire. It was density. It was vibration. The lower realms, known as Sheol, Hades, Duat, were not places but frequencies. Realms where the soul, after death, could remain trapped by unresolved grief, guilt, fear, and forgetting. Zones where consciousness, still clinging to illusions, wandered without clarity. Jesus entered these layers not to judge, but to liberate. The Gospel of Nicodemus, an apocryphal text once dismissed but rich with esoteric insight, tells of a quake in the realms of shadow. A divine pulse. As he arrived, the gates of Hades shook. Darkness trembled. Adam and Eve, the symbolic roots of humanity, were among the souls who felt the echo. For them and countless others, Jesus brought not instruction, but presence. Not condemnation, but remembrance. He wasn't there to rescue in the old sense. He came as a psychopomp. a soul guide. Like Hermes of the Greeks, like Anubis of the Egyptians, like the shamans who walked between worlds to retrieve what was lost. His journey was not a detour, it was the completion of the mission. To gather the scattered, to repair the web, to bring home every part of humanity forgotten in the shadows. This is the spiritual dark night of the soul, a descent not into chaos, but through it. Every awakened being must walk it. Through sorrow, through death, through the thick veils of illusion that separate us from our essence. And Jesus, fully aware of his divinity, still chose to enter it. Not for purification, but for reclamation. This was not dormancy. Those 3 days were dense with activity. They were a vibrational storm. 3, always a number of synthesis: mind, body, spirit. Past, present, future. Creation, dissolution, resurrection. The tomb was not just a resting place, it was an interdimensional chamber where Jesus reconfigured not only himself, but the grid of collective memory. He faced not demons as myth describes them, but personified frequencies, fear hardened into form, guilt woven into walls, trauma thick like fog. These were not entities imposed from without. They were humanity's own projections. Collective pain made conscious. And he moved through them, not with violence, but with knowing. He saw them not as evil, but as wounded. And by seeing them clearly, he unmade them. He untied ancient knots. He reversed unspoken contracts. He shattered false laws etched into ether by centuries of unconscious suffering. This is alchemy. Not turning lead into gold, but fear into light. Wound into wisdom. Separation into union. The descent was not a detour. It was the climax. Because no liberation is whole unless it includes the forgotten. No light is full unless it touches shadow. And so when Jesus rose again, he rose not just from death, but from density. His vibration had changed. He no longer moved as one anchored to a single form. He appeared in different ways. He was felt more than seen. He passed through walls, was known by presence, not by face. He was not limited. He was luminous. This is what the 7th door reveals. That awakening is not escape. It is inclusion. True light does not avoid the dark, it enters it, embraces it, and transforms it. Jesus did not flee from pain. He allowed it. He infused it with divinity. And in doing so, he showed us the map. The lower realms are not beneath us. They are around us. Inside us. They are states of vibration, accessible in grief, in shame, in despair. And that is why he descended there. Because so many of us are still there, even now. His mission was always about total liberation, not just of souls in heaven, but of minds in bondage. And he showed us, by example, that no darkness is so deep that it cannot be reached by the light of awakened presence. Wherever you are, however lost you feel, the door remains. You are not alone in the underworld. You are not trapped. You are remembered. The path to resurrection begins in the descent. And it is there, in the depths of your own cave, that you may begin to hear a voice, not shouting, not commanding, but whispering. I have been here too. And there is a way out. What if the act of rising wasn't about leaving this world behind, but inhabiting it more fully, more luminously, with a consciousness so expansive that matter itself bends to meet it? Ascension, in its essence, is not an escape from reality. It is its transfiguration. And when we look beyond the veil of tradition, beyond the simplistic image of Jesus floating upward into clouds, we discover something far more radical, an embodied message etched not in doctrine, but in frequency. The account of Jesus' ascension, as described in the Acts of the Apostles, is wrapped in symbolism so potent that it almost demands a different kind of perception to decode. After 40 days of post-resurrection appearances, enigmatic, sudden, almost ghost-like, Jesus stands before his disciples and disappears into a cloud. To the untrained eye, it might appear as the final curtain on a divine drama. But to those who understand the language of vibration, this is not an ending. It's a transmission, a demonstration, a glimpse into a field of possibility that lives within each of us. The cloud into which he vanishes isn't just skyborne mist. In every ancient mystical tradition, the cloud is a motif for the boundary layer between dimensions. It is the threshold where form meets formlessness, where the density of matter dissolves into the subtlety of light. In Hebrew scripture, God appears in clouds. In Hindu mythology, the gods travel in vimanas cloaked in shimmering vapor. This is not atmosphere, it is energetic transition. When Jesus enters the cloud, he is not going somewhere else. He is shifting resonance. He is activating a different vibrational state. He is not leaving. He is becoming. The word ascension does not refer to a change in altitude. It refers to a change in frequency. It means transcendence of heaviness. The densest parts of human existence, fear, shame, pain, limitation, begin to harmonize with the lighter, finer vibrations of divine consciousness. It is a moment of spiritual coherence, when all the fragmented aspects of being, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, align like tones in a cosmic chord. In esoteric traditions across the globe, we find this same truth encoded under many names. In Kabbalistic mysticism, it is the Merkaba, the chariot of light formed by pure intention and sacred geometry. In Tibetan Buddhism, it is the rainbow body, the spontaneous dissolution of the body into colored light upon the realization of full awareness. In ancient Egypt, it is the Sahu, the eternal form made of purified essence. The names change. The essence remains. Ascension is the full embodiment of the divine in the physical plane. Jesus was not alone in this process, but he made it visible. For 40 days, a period heavy with symbolic gestation, echoing the flood, the desert, the womb, he moved among his disciples in a form unlike anything they had seen. He ate, yet passed through walls. He touched, yet was unrecognizable. His presence was felt more than seen. His voice resonated beyond sound. He was no longer bound by three-dimensionality. His body had become radiant with divine light, coherent, translucent, vibrant. This wasn't a ghost. It was a glimpse of our potential. In those days, Jesus wasn't teaching in the usual way. He was downloading a frequency. He was seeding an awareness. Not through speeches, but through presence. His mission had shifted from explaining the kingdom of heaven to anchoring it in the fabric of human consciousness. When he finally rose, it was not to ascend to a distant place but to entrain the field with a new vibration, a kind of cosmic tuning fork that would echo across centuries. He wasn't abandoning humanity. He was entering it more deeply. Not in form, but in essence. His physical absence became his energetic omnipresence. After the ascension, the disciples did not remain the same. They began to exhibit qualities beyond their previous capacities. Peter's shadow healed the sick. Stephen looked into the sky and saw realities no longer veiled. John downloaded visions that would become the Book of Revelation, an intricate blueprint of cosmic unfoldings. This was not myth. This was resonance. They weren't just remembering what he said, they were vibrating at the frequency he had awakened in them. This is the unspoken legacy of the ascension. Not belief. Transmission. A field of possibility open to any who dare to harmonize with it. That field is still here. It hums quietly beneath the noise of ordinary life, waiting for the courageous, the surrendered, the inwardly still. Christian mystics, Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, Hildegard of Bingen, entered this field in solitude and silence. Their writings speak not of theology, but of fire. of visions, of healing, of overwhelming light that pours through them, not from outside, but from within. They did not ascend through knowledge. They ascended through surrender. In that state of deep alignment, time collapses. Space bends. Matter yields to intention. Thought, feeling, and action cease to contradict one another and become a unified wave of divine expression. This is the light body, an internal coherence so powerful that the soul begins to illuminate the world around it. Jesus showed us that this is not only possible, it is inevitable. We are all headed toward this unfolding, because the soul, by its very nature, seeks light. And ascension, in its truest form, is not a privilege for the holy, it is the birthright of the awake. But the most profound revelation of this process comes not in the rising, but in the return. For as we open the ninth and final gate, we discover the deepest mystery, that the Christ we sought in history, in heaven, in books, has been within us all along. This is not poetic metaphor. It is literal vibration. Christ in you, the hope of glory, Paul wrote, not as a doctrinal flourish, but as a statement of activation. Christ is not a surname, not a singular being. Christ is a frequency, a state of being in which the ego dissolves and the source reveals itself, not in visions, but in the very fabric of who we are. The mystics knew this. The desert fathers of early Christianity, the Sufis, the Kabbalists, the Gnostics. They spoke in different languages, carried different symbols, but they all whispered the same truth. The kingdom of God is within. Jesus did not come to create a new religion. He came to remind us of a forgotten unity. He came to awaken the seed of divinity in every soul. That is why his journey does not end on the cross. It echoes. It multiplies. It births itself again and again in every heart that dares to awaken. The final realization is not found in books or rituals. It blooms in silence, in surrender, in presence so deep it strips away every illusion until nothing remains but essence, pure light, wordless, formless, eternal. That is the inner Christ, the place beyond name, beyond form, where you no longer seek God, you are the living expression of God. And that is not the end of the journey. That is the beginning. The journey through the 9 gates has brought us to a profound realization. The Christ within us signifies the end of duality. In this awakened state, the boundaries between self and divinity dissolve, revealing a unified consciousness that perceives the universe as a harmonious dance of the One manifested in myriad forms. Every interaction becomes a reflection of this unity, where each pain holds the seed of compassion, and every shadow offers the possibility of reconciliation. This transformation is not merely theoretical, it is deeply experiential. It permeates every gesture, glance, and thought, healing not through deliberate intention but through the sheer presence of being. The passage through the 13 gates symbolizes the progressive unveiling of illusions, each gate representing a layer of perception that once separated us from our divine source. As these veils lift, we come to understand that separation was always an illusion. Christ's whisper has always resonated within us through intuition, love, and silence. Embracing this truth does not detach us from the world. Instead, it immerses us more deeply into it with expanded consciousness. Every aspect of life becomes sacred, eating transforms into a holy act, breathing becomes a prayer, and gazing into another's eyes becomes a communion with the eternal. The inner Christ sanctifies the mundane, turning daily existence into a living expression of the divine. In this state of integration, the dichotomy between spiritual and material dissolves. All is recognized as spirit in varying densities. Pain is no longer a curse but an invitation to deeper understanding. Death is not an end but a transition. Loss is not punishment but a release. The inner Christ does not judge but understands, heals, and reconnects, radiating transformation that extends beyond the individual to families, communities, and societies. This collective awakening is not imposed by doctrine but arises naturally as souls seek to return to their source. Each crisis and collapse in the outer world reflects the birth pangs of a new consciousness. Jesus served as the prototype, we are the continuation, embodying the same divine field in new forms and times. The final call is internal, guiding us to the inner silence where the voice of Christ resonates with the vibration that created the worlds. He declares, "You are my temple. You are my image. You are an extension of the eternal light." This voice has always been ours. At the culmination of the ninth gate, we find not an end but a beginning, a life where we no longer seek the light but live as the light, with the heart as an altar and consciousness as a mirror of the eternal. Christ is no longer a distant figure but a pulsating reality within every cell of our being. Now, as we stand at this threshold, I invite you to close your eyes, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, what veil still remains within me? What part of me still fears to embrace the light that I am? What aspect resists the memory of my divine nature? Share in the comments which of these gates resonated most with your soul. What was awakened within you during this journey? Here, our comments are not mere responses, they are collective manifestations of consciousness. By sharing, you anchor this truth in the field, activating the frequency of Christ through your words. Words become bridges. Write in the comments, "I activate the light of Christ within me through the gate of," and complete it with the gate that touched you most deeply. Together, let's form a vibrational chain that echoes across realms, recognizing that we are part of a living network of awakened souls. If you are here now, it's because this memory has already begun to stir within you. So, manifest this truth, share your experience, and help expand this field of awakening. If this journey has touched your heart, know that the path continues. In the next exploration, the Brotherhood of Light, the secret knowledge of Jesus that history erased, we delve into the hidden allies of Jesus and the guardians of an ancient wisdom lineage that history tried to conceal. Let us continue this journey together, illuminating the path with the light that resides within us all.